Hey, welcome to The Great Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber. We are post-Christmas. We are pre-New Year's Eve, kind of in that middle lull in which we're just, eating snacks and staring at the wall. It's really, really glorious and relaxing. I'm Kevin Lieber, and with me, as always, is Matthew Tabor.
It's that middle ground. It is the perineum of the calendar.
Yeah. Yes. Taintmas. Merry Taintmas. I mean, by the time this episode comes out, I think we'll be out of Taintmas and we'll be, in the new year, we'll be in 2024. But yeah, for now, I have seen a lot of memes for the first time this year, seemingly. Maybe I never noticed them in the past, kind of, I don't know, shining a light a little bit on this lull period, where you just are disheveled, unshowered, smelly, half awake, shoveling cookies in your face, and really winding down in an unhealthy but at the same time much needed way, before the ramp up of the new year.
No one expects anything of you between those two holidays, do they? I mean, you'd get away with anything. The expectation, there's no lower bar in the year than like December 29th.
The bar's dropped. It's on the floor. You cannot.
A dog knocked it over.
You can't limbo your way beneath that bar, which is nice, especially because we have a lot of gigantic plans for next year. I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels if they have big plans for 2024. You and I, Matt, are certainly in a place in which I think we're ready to take on more than ever and really looking forward to it and excited about it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, let's just try to do as much as possible here. We talk on this podcast, the point of this podcast, Make Something Mean Something, about doing stuff, about making things, in waking up, doing your little grind until you can't grind no more and starting again the next day. And I don't know what that says about us, that at this point where we're at in our grind game, we're really just looking forward to expanding upon it and grinding more, maybe grinding less in some aspects, but bringing more people into the fold also to support the grind, but really expanding, onwards and upwards with a lot more projects.
Yeah. Simply more. And I mean, that's super vague, but there's some really interesting stuff within this. So expanding it is ridiculously hard in the creative sphere. How many people have we talked to who have trouble with this? And it's the same for us. If you want to do more, it's not as simple as, okay, I will just write 10 times more. You can't do that. There is a limit to really productivity. So it's also not as simple as, well, I'll just get somebody else to do this. No, there's something unique in this kind of work where expanding, hiring out, etc., is really difficult. There are no certifications that matter where you can look at it and say, this person can do what I need. If we had a factory of some kind, it's like, oh, we don't have time anymore to move all the bags of feed. They're like, okay, let's go find a forklift certified operator who can handle the warehouse and do all these things. Then we won't have to do them. That's it. We would find the person who fit well and get them. We can't do that. So we have to figure out how we get the same result. And sometimes not even being able to express or figure out what we need. It's really a crazy challenge for us to do more.
Yeah, it is, but it can be done. I mean, I think of, although I guess animation in some ways is a little closer to your forklift operator analogy, because there is kind of like very specific, repeatable tasks that have to be done. But I was going to say someone like, Meat Canyon has been really wildly successful, I think, in a way that's admirable in the YouTube space in working with people. Or, James, the Odd Ones Out, also. It seems like those guys in the animation space, they work with like background artists and I don't know exactly storyboard artists, tweeners maybe. Is that a thing, or do the programs take care of that for you these days? I don't know. I don't actually know the inner workings. Thumbnail artists certainly, but they seem to do a really nice job, I think, in identifying talent, hiring people on, bringing them into the fold, adding to their team, and pumping out a lot of great quality, consistent content that a lot of people like. So certainly it can be done. But you're right. I think in the education space also it's a little harder, maybe certainly depending upon things like, we spoke about on the podcast recently with the plagiarism stuff. That's obviously a huge, huge thing to worry about when you're trying to bring people on, to write for you or to research for you, to be able to vet them and vet their work and make sure that they're not just copying and pasting from other sources or just tweaking a word here or there. And then before you know it, it's like, oh, this entire script was essentially lifted from something else. And now I'm in a video that has 11 million views highlighting the work that was copied. So, that's definitely a concern.
Content.
Yeah. In the education space, I think. Less so in something like making original cartoons where we just by default have to make that stuff up, Well, I guess jokes could be lifted and reused for those for sure. We've talked about that as well.
Definitely.
Comedy,
Yeah.
So
there's a tremendous amount of introspection and self-analysis that has to go on with all of this. And I think a couple of the people you mentioned, it's worth pointing out that they are very good at that. Meat Canyon seems to be very honest with himself about what he does, what he needs, what he should continue to do, what he should get somebody else to do, and then managing that team of people. That's a tough skill. It's hard enough to do things and do them well. Adding on understanding what you do and why you do it and how you do it is extremely difficult. And it's not something that you have to do very often. Very few, I say that people aren't very good at it, not because they're talentless losers, but because almost nobody has any practice. You don't sit there and try to get this distance from yourself so you can have a perspective on how you operate. It's sort of like being a therapist for yourself, but with how you work. It's really tough to do. And if you can do that, you have a leg up for sure. We've talked in the past about how it's so useful to work with somebody else because they fulfill that role for you. That's one of the beauties of having a team of people or even just one other person, that they can be that outside analysis for you. And we got a hint of that. I mean, we've talked about the way we work a million times, but we got a hint of it with Pebbles and Michael Cusack. You could tell that these are two guys who understand what the other does. They are not exactly the same, and they can feed off each other and kind of analyze each other in a good, healthy way that allows them to be maximally productive. That's awesome. But when you don't have somebody to do that, you have to do it to yourself. That is a difficult trick.
Well, in comedy in particular, you see that over and over and over again, I think for that very reason. So like the comedy duo thing, right, has been around for over 100 years. I mean, at least. I don't know what comedy duos were like, in Shakespeare's day, but Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, I was a huge fan growing up of Bob and David, Bob Odenkirk and David Cross. But even something like, Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, they were really the comedy. Seinfeld, that sitcom, was really a comedy duo, that show. It was those two guys, filling out. I mean, George Costanza was really Larry David. So it's pretty obvious when you just look at the history of extremely successful comedy teams that having someone to bounce your ideas off of is really helpful. And look at the success of Smiling Friends as a result. When you have those two guys, it's like, here's something that I think is funny. Do you think it's funny? It's like, well, if the answer is yes, and you both think it's funny, it's probably pretty funny. It's good to know that.
And if somebody says no, you need to talk about why. And that's a really important thing. We do that in scripts all the time, not with what's funny, but with what's important.
Sure.
Where I'll throw something in and I'm like, this is, if there's one takeaway from this video, it needs to be this line, and you'll be like, it doesn't really have to do with anything. And then, we talk about how to either cut that, okay, it kind of is a different video. It doesn't belong here. Or like, okay, how do you present this in such a way that it adds to the video and you get the takeaway? We've done both things a lot of times, and it's a result of really that outside perspective, you being on the outside in the sense that you didn't write that line, and me being so on the inside, having written one line that I can't see it on the audience side. But yeah, if you have to sit down and think about that. I mean, I've done this with editing my own writing, and editing other people's writing is easy. It's awesome. It's so easy. I love doing it. Editing your own is brutally difficult because you obviously think one way, which is why you wrote the line that way in the first place.
Yeah.
Yet your task is to try to be detached and objective. Oh, that's hard. It's almost impossible to describe. If you try to come up with an analogy for it, you almost can't even do it. It's like throwing a football and then running to catch it yourself.
Yeah. Well, you know what you mean. And I think that's almost always those moments in which when we're working together on a script, I come in and I'm like, the problem here is like, I don't know what you mean. But you know what you mean. You have all of the information. You have all of the setup in your head and you wrote it out in a specific way with all of the background and context and everything in your brain. But I don't have any of that. No one else does. No one has any of the like subconscious inner working little gears that are spinning in your head when you wrote something. I don't have that. So I'm coming in cold, reading a thing, and there might be a line, an intro line, or a transition, or an outro line that's supposed to, be like a football spike moment, the touchdown celebration of some point. And I read it, and I'm like, I don't know what this means, or like, I don't understand why you said that when this is what came before it. And then it's like, oh, well, it's because X, Y, Z. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's XYZ, then it needs to be phrased differently. And we'll just rewrite it so that it is explicitly what you meant. And this is getting a little conceptual, but like there's a lot of times where you know what you meant. I know what I meant. And here's what I said. But what you said isn't the best way to explain what you meant. And that's that's an impossible thing to figure out by yourself. You cannot figure that out by yourself. You have to have someone else involved in that process. And I actually think I think about this a lot in terms of this podcast because it's a real challenge for me, a challenge that I find interesting and I like, which is why I like doing this show. But it is a real challenge for me a lot to articulate what I think out loud to you. And not only to you, but to all of our listeners. Because there is an insane difference between knowing what I think and why I think that and turning that into words that someone else could understand. Because I have like 40 years of experience and like different examples that built up like block by block to reach this point at the tip of a, pyramid that I've built in my brain. And it's so hard to go backwards and start from like the beginning of laying all of those bricks, laying that foundation and be like, here's how I got to this point. And this is why I think this thing at the end of this like long trail of stuff that led me to this conclusion. Holy crap. Like that is a real challenge. And it's a challenge in writing, but it's also a challenge in speaking. It's a challenge in doing something like a podcast. And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up a lot on podcasts. And when you see like, snippets clipped out and it's like, did you see so-and-so, said XYZ? It's like, well, I'm sure there probably was like a lot that led up to them saying that they did not explain very well. And then that's where like the out of context stuff becomes either a big problem or very funny or whatever. Does that make sense?
It does. Everything that you went over seems to break it down into two parts pretty much. One is conveying the meaning that you intend. That's one challenge. And then the clarity with that, doing that in a way that the meaning can be received clearly. Both of those things are really hard to do. They're really hard. Sometimes they're even harder when you're most familiar with whatever the topic is. Those are things that are such a delicate combination of so many factors that you don't even know where to begin to pull them apart. Let's say you're proud of where you live, okay? You're proud of your neighborhood, something like that. I don't know. And I ask you why. Well, there's probably some immediate one-liner that gets you started, and that's fine. But if I say, give me your 5 best minutes, you got a 5-minute window. Tell me why the place you're from is important to you. You're going to have a hard time unless you have thought a lot about it. As you start to do it, you're going to think, oh man, everything I just said kind of sounds like everywhere else. Everybody who lives in all these other places would say roughly the same sorts of things. They could say at least. So what is really truly unique about my pride in where I'm from? You will start to realize quickly how difficult this is, that you can't convey the meaning that Kevin's talking about because you haven't defined it clearly enough yourself. And then you can't put it in a way that conveys that meaning to somebody else so that they can receive exactly what you're thinking. And this is on the example I just pulled is one that everybody has. Everybody's from somewhere. Everybody lives somewhere. They've got some kind of background story or a current story. That's what's most important to them. And what would you do if you had 5 minutes? Yeah, you're probably in trouble unless you've legitimately attacked this topic in the past. I have thought a great deal about this exact topic, and it took me years and years and years to be able to do something like express it cleanly in 5 minutes. Well, I'll take all these things that we're talking about and combine them. Well, this is your task to analyze yourself and what you think and how you do things. And it goes beyond just conveying it to somebody else. You have to get the same things out of them when you're expanding your creative enterprise. So not only do you need to get them to understand, but you need their output to fall in line with what your output was. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it has to be in service of it in such a way that your life is a little easier. Otherwise, there's no point in hiring.
It has to be a net positive. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, right. You've got to gain something. And to do that, they have to work within, kind of the lane that you've been running in. So it takes this topic of how hard it is to know what you're doing and to express it and just ratchets it up to a nearly insurmountable power, because then you need somebody else to not just get it, but start to replicate parts of it. This is very, very hard to do.
Yeah, and I want to give another example that I thought of recently that has nothing to do with, analyzing your workflow or, delegating to other people, because quite frankly, this is something that it's a problem that probably very few people actually have. You have to be at a certain place to even start thinking about being able to do that sort of thing. But when it comes to the topic of understanding and being able to articulate even why you feel a certain way about something, I've been thinking about this recently, and this is like such an innocuous example, but I think it's a good one because everybody like loves or hates different shows, right? Different music, different movies. Oh, I hate that band. I love this band. Have you ever thought like why? like really thought about it? Like why you love this movie or you hate that TV show? Have you really thought about the reasons why? And then if you have you thought about ways in which to then articulate that to other people? I mean, quite obviously, this is what reviewers do. This is what critics do. This is the job of a critic, is to break down, what is it about The Big Lebowski that makes it, the number one Coen Brothers movie of all time on my Coen Brothers top 10 list or whatever it is. So obviously, that's what that job is. But like, for example, the new season of Reacher is out, which is a show on Amazon Prime. It's based on a whole long series of books. There are a whole bunch of books in this series about this character, Reacher, who is the best way I would describe it is if like a hulking tough guy brute was also like a Sherlock Holmes mystery solving genius. That's really what the Reacher character is. It's like the toughest MMA guy of all time is also the smartest guy in every room that he's in and needs to solve some kind of mystery. Well, I loved season 1 of this show and I am dreadfully bored by season 2. Now, this is the same show. It's the same character. It's the same guy that I really liked from season 1 doing the same things, trying to solve a mystery, beating up bad guys, like being generally like the alpha malest person who ever lived. Like it's the same
It's truly
thing.
a continuation of season 1. Yeah. It's a faithful here's season 2 of a show.
Yeah. And it's based on another book in this series that was obviously very successful. So it's not like the writers are going rogue here and like ruining the character or ruining, Reacher. So naturally, I've just started to think to myself, like, what's going on here? Why do I not like this? Like, why does it take me 3 sittings to finish one of these episodes? Whereas with season 1, I was binging it like, just a buffet of the most entertaining thing I ever watched, just slamming episode after episode and enjoying every second of it. And, I've come up with some stuff that I think doesn't work for me over the past couple of days, but I don't know if it's worth getting into that. But those are the types of things that I think people don't really do a whole lot. Like people will just stop at the I don't like this stage of an opinion. Right? They'll just stop at like here's how I feel about this thing level and never dig, another inch down below that to get to a point of like, well, why do I feel this way? What's different? What's not working for me? What did they change? What is it about me that isn't connecting to this? It's just none of that level of analysis happening. I find for the most part, it's just kind of like, this sucks. At the end.
We want to help you make something and mean something. And we say that phrase all the time because when you're making something and you know it means something, even if it's just to you, that's when you feel pretty good about what you're creating. The support for the Create Unknown in recent weeks has been incredible. Animators, artists, musicians, YouTubers, aspiring filmmakers, comedians, it is crazy how talented everybody in this community is. Consider joining the Create Unknown Patreon. Every dollar that comes through goes straight into the podcast and its community. That means more highlights videos. It means a big Minecraft project that's on the way. And eventually we'd like to manufacture custom piss bottles so you never have to leave your battle station. And being a patron unlocks participation in all of our live recordings. You've seen the roster of guests we've had. Having access to their minds is a unique opportunity. You can go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown or click the link that's in the description. Every little bit helps and your support means absolutely everything to us. Patreon.com/thecreateunknown, links in the description. We appreciate you, Space Cowboys.
We've had so many conversations over the years about different things where we do precisely this. And I think that if if you're listening to us right now and you don't do this all the time, whether it's thinking yourself, like Kevin's talking about with season 2 of Reacher, or having the conversation with somebody else about these things, you need to do this. You need to cultivate this in your life. You have to have this. So we had this discussion about some facet of country music, and I can't remember what kicked it off, but I think I sent. I know what kicked it off. We started talking about the band song "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down," and it evolved into discussing what we did and didn't like about the songs. And Kevin, you pointed out how many popular country songs are what you called list songs.
Yeah.
That they just kind of, I don't know, how would you describe that?
Yeah. So I think this is the kind of thing that like once you can't unsee it. I mean, obviously in this arena, you wouldn't be able to unhear it. But there are a lot of modern country songs, country western songs, or maybe it's just pop country. I don't know how granular people get, into the subgenres of modern country music, but holy cow, there are a lot of songs that I've heard that, are extremely popular in that genre where they're just naming things that country people like. So
yes,
their truck, drinking beer,
Yep.
a horse, maybe,
Yes.
going to Walmart,
Yes.
chewing tobacco, a certain brand, maybe,
Spitting it.
liking a particular NASCAR driver the best, like the type of, your cowboy boots, your hat, the type of shirt you wear, maybe, your clothes, I guess, in general. Maybe
the gun you carry.
Sure, the gun you carry, your outdoor hobbies like fishing or hunting, maybe. It's just listing stuff that you like.
The
is
girl
the song.
you're dating.
Yeah.
The back road you're driving on. Yes. I know. I know the song. I from you going through the whole list, it made me go through. It made me match your topics with the song. It was Aaron Lewis's Country Boy. And this is a very good example. So Aaron Lewis was the lead singer of Stained, if anybody remembers Stained. And he went solo and country some years ago. He's a master of the list song in a way that I think means something. Okay. And so there are 3 very good list songs that he has, one of which doesn't seem like a list song. But Country Boy, it was his first that really kind of hit it. And it's that list of things that would resonate with somebody who lives in the country. Another one is it's called Granddaddy's Gun, and it's about a beat up shotgun that gets handed down to him. But all the elements of this story are really a familiar list to somebody who has gone through that experience as a kid. So it works really well. And then there's another song where Aaron Lewis makes a distinction between a northern redneck and a southern one, and that there are people who are legitimately country types who may happen to be in New England or the mid-Atlantic states, and their existence is different, but the general theme that drives them is the same, in that not all the country people are in the South. That's the theme of it. But he's basically listing all of these qualities that are unique to the northern country people. Not a little bit, that's crossover to make the point that yes, we do have a fair bit in common. These are the best. I love these songs. I love every country list song that goes back.
You forgot one that you love, I think. But you definitely forgot one that is insanely popular.
What is it?
It has 158 million views on YouTube. It's by Hank Williams Jr. and it's called A Country Boy Can Survive.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
this is like the granddaddy, I think, of these list songs, because this whole song is just describing what a country boy is by listing
Yes.
different activities and character traits of a country boy. So, you know, I live in the backwoods, you see, my woman and the kids and the dogs and me. I got a shotgun, a rifle, and a four-wheel drive, and a country boy can survive. That's it.
That's
it's
right.
like the list of stuff that makes me a country boy.
Yeah, and I actually like the one line there, because I if I get the opportunity in a conversation, usually if somebody asks about my standard of living or something like that, which is a weird way to put it, but you know, sometimes these things come up, and I don't want to talk about that ever, and my standard of living is garbage, and it always will be. This is what I enjoy. But I say, well, yes, I'm independently wealthy because I have a shotgun, a rifle, and all-wheel drive, because I drive a Subaru. You know, and if somebody is familiar with the line in that song, they know that I'm goofing on, you know, Hank Williams Jr. is not saying he drives a Subaru. You know what I mean?
No.
A Subaru sedan is the wrong fit for a reference with that song, and that's why it's funny. At least that's why I think it's funny. But you're right. From beginning to end, all of these are list songs. You do not like it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I love the list song. And I thought about it when you pointed that out and kind of made the objection. I thought, oh, he's right. There are a lot of songs that truly are just a list of topics that somebody scrawled on a very long CVS receipt.
It's like Bubba from Forrest Gump just naming different types of shrimp. That's
right.
That's to me like
it is.
It's conceptually the same thing. Or Samwise naming the things you could do with potatoes. Right? All
boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
Yeah.
I like being reminded of every one of those elements. That's what I love.
It paints a picture. Yeah, it definitely paints a picture that you get to sort of absorb and live in, that you can relate to. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and there are parts that I don't like too, and that's part of the list is when I object to something on the list. Okay, so in the Aaron Lewis Country Boy song, he makes a reference to him smoking marijuana occasionally. Well, that's part of his list. That isn't me. That's not my list. I don't skip that. Draw a line through it. So I like that too, where I hear a thing and I'm like, oh, absolutely. And then the next one, I'm like, not me. I understand some people, but not me. And then there might be one where I'm just like, no, definitely not. So for example, I don't love fishing. There are a lot of fishing references in songs, and there are some great fishing songs. The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band's "Fishing in the Dark" is fantastic. But I myself am not a fishing type. And I like thinking about that, whether this thing is important to me, whether I like it, whether I identify with it, or whether it is foreign to me. And the list songs are constant prompts of this. I enjoy that. I can see why some people wouldn't enjoy it in theory at all, even, regardless of what was on the list. But definitely, if everything on the list is foreign to you, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be the worst. I'm sure I've heard list songs in foreign languages and not even known it, and just thought, man, this song blows. Well, yeah. But you like more meaning in the music and in what's happening with lyrics and stuff like that, instead of a really simplistic list, I suppose.
Oh yeah, like that's the sense I like Kate McCannon, which is a Colder Wall song. I think that was part of that initial discussion in which I was like, this is just naming things. And you were like, I like that. And then I sent you the Kate McCannon song, and I was like, well, this is what I like, which is a story. That song is a story. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has a climax, and it has an end. I guess that's more of like I don't know, the Johnny Cash school. Not that I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan, but the storytelling side of it, I
I
just
would
think
throw
is
two
more
in.
interesting.
Yeah, because I love that. The two genres of song I like the most are probably list songs and story songs.
Okay.
And Kenny Rogers and Gordon Lightfoot are masterful story song people. I love those songs. Most of Kenny Rogers' best songs, even his love songs, tend to be stories. And Gordon Lightfoot was, the kind of poet laureate of Canada because of his story songs. So I like that too. Now, Kevin, you and I like different stories and different styles of stories.
Sure.
But we match up on the generality of, you listen to a song and you get a book in 3 minutes. That's really cool. And we value that and like that in our own ways.
Yeah. How did we get to this topic though? I don't actually remember.
Well, this is knowing this,
right.
this and talking about it. This is the sort of introspection that you get when you think about what you do and don't like. We talked before we hit record on this podcast. You were doing exactly this, talking about Neil Shusterman's Unwind and why you weren't excited reading it. Why that style of writing didn't grab you. And we talked about what you didn't like. You went into that. Or what, it's not that it's bad, it's that it's not a fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
That was the takeaway on it. And also we talked about why it is the way it is and why it's a fit for, a lot of 14-year-olds. Those conversations, that's how you understand things. That's how you get to understand things around you and also yourself. And it sounds lame to put it that way, but we do this all the time with all sorts of topics, with sports and books and music and whatever. And we have a lot of fun doing it. I don't think we've ever offended each other. It's possible.
Well, no, but that's because I think, and I notice a lot of people don't seem to subscribe to this belief that you and I both subscribe to, which is that not everything is for me and not everything is for you.
Right.
And that's okay. Yeah. It seems like people stumble on this concept all the time, whether they're arguing about wrestling or movies or heavy metal music or whatever it is. Not everything is for you. And that doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, you just said that we were discussing how the Neil Shusterman book wasn't grabbing my attention. As I was reading it, my thoughts kept wandering away from being, enraptured by the story and just thinking like, what else could I be doing right now? Well, that's not like really a great sign of being, entertained by any sort of piece of media. And the conclusion was it was just not for me. Like, there are plenty of people who I think it's a great, great fit for, and perhaps he's their favorite author in the world. And that's great. That's cool. I'm glad that guy has an audience and that people love it and they're, it's meaningful to them and they can't wait for his next book or whatever the case may be. I don't then plant the flag and say like, this sucks and no one should like it. And you're an idiot if you do. Like, that's where I see a lot of people getting into stupid, pointless arguments where they're doing that. They're engaging in that type of critical behavior in which they're, planting flags and drawing lines in the sand to say, because I don't like it, no one should, and it's garbage. Objectively. That's not it's like, that's a thing. What are you talking about?
No, and it's not a useful endeavor either. So think about this. If you don't like a thing, talking about why somebody else shouldn't like a thing doesn't help you understand it anymore. You don't know any more about yourself and you don't know any more about the music or whatever it is by doing that. It's a totally self-indulgent waste of time. The people who do that never really get anywhere. They don't at all. we never do this. We don't bother because it's a waste of time. We put a tremendous amount of effort into the opposite of it. And so we get what we do and who we are and what we want. We teased this bit at the very beginning. Kevin did, rather. We've got good stuff coming down the pipe. Well, that's because we know who we are and what we're doing. I mean, and that's a difficult state to achieve. Okay, it takes a lot to get there, because you figure it out tiny piece by tiny piece, and you don't even assemble those pieces for a very long time. And most of them you won't ever draw on anyway. So you have this huge library of pieces that you only use a portion of down the line. But you certainly aren't getting anywhere if you don't have those pieces at all. You just don't. And I feel like when people do what you just described, Kevin, that attacking everybody else, you shouldn't do that. What they're really trying to do is understand and express why they don't like it. That's the exercise that I feel like they're in, that they're using that medium to understand what they themselves feel. That's okay, but there are better ways to do it. And if it's just such a waste of time and energy.
Well, I think maybe they're trying to understand why they don't like it, but maybe they're just trying to solidify their identity as a person who likes this thing and doesn't like something else. I think that's part of it too. So when you talk about knowing who you are, knowing where you are, knowing what it is you like and don't like and why, and being comfortable with all of that, that's really different and kind of the opposite of someone who doesn't really know who they are, doesn't understand why they like what they like and don't what they don't, and then at the same time are trying to find their place in this messy, chaotic world of, the internet or real life, trying to stand out, trying to feel special or unique or different or have some sort of virtue or value, and just kind of clawing for ways to do that. And one of the ways to do that is by, hitching your wagon to this thing sucks or that thing is better. And it's like, okay, it's a shallow way to achieve that goal. But I understand, especially why younger people do it, because it's harder to know who you are, when you have no experience or very little experience.
It is. And knowing what you don't like is usually much, much easier than knowing what you like. It's obvious. You can smell food, and if it's something that makes you want to puke, you know that faster than if it kind of smells good. Well, what's that actually mean? Is it going to taste really good? Does it rank in the top 20 of dishes that you've smelled? No. But the thing that makes you want to puke. Like it's a different level of immediate knowledge. So the criticism like that is a very strong thread in the Jewish intellectual tradition. This is something that, I spent a couple of years in Israel. I was educated by some extremely talented scholars of Jewish history and Hebrew, etc. And there are a couple sayings here that are quite funny. They're jokey but true. One of them is that if you have two Jews arguing, you have three opinions. That owes to the complexity of it all. And there's one about a Jewish man on a deserted island, and he finally gets rescued. And when he gets rescued, they see that he's built synagogues so that he can continue to worship. But he's built two of them. And they ask him, why didn't you just build one? And he points to the second one, says, oh, that one I don't go to. So
right.
And it's that thing where it's like what you do buy into and enjoy and value is one thing, and what you reject is very important in another. And finding the way to juggle those two things in a healthy way that's very beneficial to you as opposed to being that person who's extremely resentful and angry about everything all the time. They're so hyper fixated on the thing they don't like. Well, that balance is off. That's the wrong balance. You don't hate that I like music that is shit to you. You're happy for me that I have music that I like.
I wouldn't even call it that. I would, I think the most, like the harshest criticism I would give for some of that music is just that I find it boring. That's like the worst word I would ever use. I wouldn't even call it, trash or garbage or stupid or no. Those are way too hard and dismissive of words. I would say more like it does. I don't vibe with it. It doesn't resonate with me. I find the energy to be too low. Like I would have more, I think, nuanced explanations for why I wouldn't listen to it and really kind of leave it at that.
Yeah. But I mean, like the point that I wanted to make on it is that you aren't thinking, you don't have pity for me.
No.
That I am slumming it with music and I am missing out on the very best stuff. And you're slowly trying to convert me to popping the camera on, and I too have a Meshuggah hat on. That you're not trying to get me into the music that you value at all.
No,
at all. And every once in a while, there's this little tiny thing where there's a mutual crossover that we both enjoy. 16 Horsepower is one of those bands. I saw them live in 1999 in a total accident, absolutely total accident. And it's enough of the things that the two of us like that we both like this music. You're more into it than I am, but I like it. That's normal. That's healthy. I am not trying to get you to list songs about spitting, chewing tobacco. I'm just not.
Yeah.
It's okay that you don't care about that. It's okay that I can't even describe some of the music that you listen to, but the older stuff like Tool and Pantera, that's like stress music to me. I don't. That's too much effort. It's not my thing, but that doesn't matter. I know you like it. I know Jeff likes that. Jeff Strife in the chat, he's a big fan of a lot of the same bands that you are. And that type of guitar playing too. Dean Lamb, you talk to him about precisely this type of music, and I respect it a tremendous amount. I don't want to listen to it. It's not for me. We know these things about ourselves, and it makes it easier for us to do things with others. To make content. I mean, it's not, we don't do music, but we can do artistic things with an awareness of ourselves and also, somebody else in the audience. That matters. It matters a lot. Otherwise, you're just kind of making things for you. And that's cool. Like, that's awesome in its own way. You're totally welcome to make art for yourself and be happy. That's awesome. But if you're trying to make it for other people, then you gotta think in this way. You have to talk to people in this way. You have to cut out the boners who are, obsessed with the cheering for something or hating against it. Those are not useful endeavors.
No.
I don't know what you've been sipping, but you've got it all wrong. It's time to commit to the leaf. We've embraced the smoothness and surprising pick-me-up that tea provides. I literally drink it all day long, nearly a gallon a day, and it powers me through research, script writing, and forums on websites that I refuse to name here. But we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. Kevin still likes the gunpowder green called Space Cowboy, and I've sampled nearly 40 Dragon's Treasure teas at this point. Lately, I've been slamming black teas like Kentucky Bourbon and Liquefied Berserk Despair. Scottish Breakfast is deep and peaty, and I smooth it over with Sebastian's Morning Earl Grey, which Has the best vanilla cream taste I think I've ever had in a cup. Give me a pot of that with a hot meatball sub from Sal's Pizza and Brooks Barbecue Chicken to wash down my last meal on death row. I highly recommend the sampler packs. You'll want to try everything just like I did. I literally have not had one tea that I wouldn't be happy to reorder. The Dragon's Wings membership fuels new tea experimentation, and the Tea of the Month Club provides a regularly scheduled surprise. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description.
And one thing I think is really important that took me kind of a while to learn, that maybe you have to learn on your own anyway, so it's not useful advice, but I'm going to share it anyway, is that it's virtually impossible to make art for yourself and have other people interested in it. It's virtually impossible. Like there is almost no way in which the thing that you personally really, really like, that you think is great and is like your art, is for other people, because it ends up being so insular and so in your own head that how could it goes back to more like the beginning of this conversation, where it's like no one else can get in there. So they're never going to appreciate it the way that you do, because you appreciate it with all of the baked in reasons that no one else knows for why you like it. So, if you want to find an audience, build an audience, try to build a business or, a side hustle or whatever it is, making things that other people, that by default other people have to like, or else it's never going to turn into anything. You really do have to consider compromising, like, what is the blend between the percentage of this video or this music or this painting that is me, and what is the blend of everybody else? Because you have to bridge that gap at some point. Otherwise, there's no bridge. It's just a gap.
Right.
There's
just a gap.
No one's interested, and no one's crossing the gap to your brain.
That's the thing, though. It requires, if you do that, all you have is the gap, and you're depending on all those other people to build a bridge to you. And that can happen. It is just
so
1 in a
hard.
million.
Oh, it's so
It is
hard.
1 in a million.
Yeah.
A really crazy example of this is Daniel Johnston. Now, this is pretty obscure, I think, at this point. There's a good documentary about him called The Devil and Daniel Johnston. He was a guy who made music that was just what was in his head. He just made the music that was in his head, and that was it. And he kept doing it. He didn't think about anybody else. He didn't think about building a fan base or anything. And weirdly, through a series of complete accidents, he developed kind of a cult following that grew into a pretty reasonable presence as far as musicians go. Fans had to build the bridge to him, and some people were into that. This is a hyper niche thing. Almost never happens. Maybe, Kevin, you can think of another example of it happening, but generally, no, not at all. Not at all. There's a gap, and if you don't build the bridge, there will not be a bridge ever.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of like a couple of directors, like maybe David Lynch, but even, David Lynch made a lot of kind of compromises to make mainstream stuff, such as Twin Peaks, which was a network television show, or, the Dune movie that he ended up hating because he couldn't really make it his own. But, he's made a lot of movies that really are just his own thing and are, pretty popular. Something like Mulholland Drive, for example, is a pretty famous movie. It's still like an auteur sort of thing that most people probably won't watch, but really even Wes Anderson, he makes Wes Anderson movies. He's not making like Iron Man 4. Like, that's not happening. His movies, he makes the way that he wants to make them. And it's kind of like, take it or leave it. Like, do you like, and some of them I take and some of them I leave. I'm actually like very hot and cold with Wes Anderson movies, some of which I absolutely adore and I think are just truly beautiful works of art. Others I can't even finish because they're so boring and uninteresting and a mess to me. But there's one Wes Anderson, man. Like, that's the point. It's not like there's like 50 of these guys. Like, he's a 1 in a billion guy who this worked out for, where he can just make his new movie and quite a lot of people watch it. For the rest of us, there has to be a lot more on the compromise side than on the, my artistic brilliance side. That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Right. And that's the difference, too, between wanting to do your artistic thing because that is your vision and that's it, versus really caring about anybody else. And I put that so generally because it can encompass so many different things. There are definitely themes, broad themes about how people work, how the world works, how life works that go into your videos. And you deliberately want to encourage people to think about those themes and value them because you think that's important for the world. That isn't something everybody does. That's the difference between just plain making your thing and then making a thing that fits with the world in some way. And it doesn't have to be deep. It doesn't have to be deep at all. The Dumb and Dumber toilet laxative scene is not deep, but it fits in the world in that here's something that a lot of people can laugh very hard at, right? But that's the point, is that here's the thing that many, many people can take joy in. Somebody made that decision that they wanted this endeavor to happen, and that's a mindset where you need to know who you are to be able to start projecting what you think is useful and valuable and entertaining and whatever it is out into the world and find who it fits and then do a good job of getting them the message. But all of it starts with your own clarity, with your own understanding of you and how you fit with the world. We've talked recently about the people who experienced the enemy, like Kurt Cobain, which David Foster Wallace, Anthony Bourdain, all these people did not have a fit with the world, and they felt quite hopeless that their lives did not fit anymore. Those are extreme examples, right? The most extreme examples. But that's how important this is. When it goes wrong, it can go all the way wrong like it did for them. But generally, you are happiest and most fulfilled when you understand what you like, what's important to you, why it's important, what you'd like to see more of in the world, who you want to encourage, maybe who you'd like to discourage. All of this stuff matters. And you've got to know what it is before you can even begin to express it.
Yeah. So how do you do that? I mean, I think a lot of people more and more, this is not just me vibing on this, but there has been plenty of studies, and we've talked about this videos too, and data suggesting that people are lonelier than ever. It's really hard to do this when you don't have anybody to bounce ideas off of, when you don't have anybody to have discussions with, to talk through why it is that you think the way that you do, why it is that you liked this one Wes Anderson film and you didn't like this one, whatever it is. And that's the other thing is like, there is no shortcut to what we're talking about. All of this happens one piece at a time, tiny baby steps, one in front of the other. But you have to engage in those baby steps in order to move at all. So, obviously we have a lot of people in the Discord that talk to each other about this stuff, but I do think it's more important than ever. The data shows it's more important than ever to really try to seek out these discussions, seek out other people to talk to about any of this stuff. Get out of your head.
Yeah, it's important for survival. It truly is. And I mean that in several different ways. I mean it in the way that you were just talking about, Kevin. I also mean it in the what do you do with your life and career type way. When you have a really good sense of understanding of you and how you fit, then you can make changes, you can pivot, you can roll with all sorts of surprises. When you don't, when your thing ends, you're in bad shape. And we've seen two types of people in, I'll put it in YouTube terms because that's what we founded this podcast on. Think back to people who were very popular back in the day. They had thriving channels. A lot of times those channels will run their course, and that is normal. Doesn't mean that the people are doing a bad job. It's just the thing ran its course. They're the people who pivot and go into something else that they enjoy in the industry, something that uses their talents. And then there are people who kind of leave the internet. They don't know what to do. Their thing died, and now they just get on with whatever is next in life. It's a lot better to be the other kind of person who knows what's up with themselves, and they can adapt. You can only adapt seamlessly and happily and all of that when you know these things about you and can evaluate your circumstances and the world around you in a useful way. You can adapt. And it's not just to crises that go your way. No, you can figure out what you should be doing that's different than it was in the past. That's what we've done several times. We've talked about this, that we've evolved what we do and how we do it. And we've gotten ahead of the crises most of the time. We did that. We adapted on our own terms because we put a lot of effort into this. But we're not reactionary with any of it because we just aren't in that position. We aren't. And I've seen a bunch of people, and we're about to see a lot more. I hate saying this, but there are a lot of people who the only thing they've ever done is YouTube, which people in our generation, Kevin, you've talked about your path with everything. You had a life before YouTube. You did things before YouTube. You could do them again if you wanted to. That was really nice that it was another thing for you as opposed to the only thing. Imagine being successful at 18 and then at 24, everything has dried up. You're starting fresh. You're not relying on past experience because your past experience is that thing that has just died.
It's like athletes. Professional athletes go through this. And if anybody has ever followed how closely professional athletes have a lot of trouble when their career is over. I mean, it's well documented how many of guys who make millions and millions of dollars, playing sports, and then just a few years after they're done playing their final game, the money's gone because of whatever they've spent it on.
So is their life,
and now there's nothing. There's just it's like, okay, what do I do?
They knew,
yeah. And you do hear
they can't play anymore.
Like there was a guy, who was it? There was some linebacker who recently unretired to come back and play. I was just watching a game last weekend who had to drop out of like school for, I don't remember what it was. So, this story is getting more and more vague. But he had gone to school. He went back to school to become a realtor or whatever it was. Because he needed a career. Like he had no job anymore. He was no longer a football player. And the reason that they told this story is because he got a phone call from the Cincinnati Bengals or whoever it was and was like, we're down a guy. Will you come back and play for us? And he was like, okay. And he came back and now he's playing again in the NFL. During which on the broadcast, they get to tell this story. In which how this dude thought he was done. He was never going to play again. And so he was now starting from scratch at age, the guy's probably not even, older than 27, 28 years old. Football careers can be brutally short, but it's like, okay, now what? Who am I? What do I do? How can I make money? What am I going to do for the rest of my life to support myself and my family?
What is my life now?
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a crazy question that normal people don't have to deal with, but you do all the time. You probably just don't think of it in those terms. normal life things just pop up and force you to consider it, right? Sometimes it'll be like losing a family member, and the issue at hand is, what is your family like now?
Mm-hmm.
What has changed? And that's one of those kind of basic existential questions that's like, all right, who am I? And that in that example, you're reevaluating, what is my family? But that stuff happens all the time. Kevin, what your example with the football player is, that is okay. A guy whose life was his job lost his job. Who is he then? You see retired people go through this like crazy. Mm-hmm. It is, some people do really well with retirement, and some people flail.
They die. Some people die.
They die. That is exactly what I was going to say, is that it's freakish how many people just really curl up and die when they lose that identity there. And it takes serious effort to adapt to that new environment. And some people are ready for it. Some people want to, some people don't want to. One of the very, very best depictions of this is in The Hurt Locker. That's just an outstanding movie if you haven't seen it. The main character, Jeremy Renner, whose cigarette I once lit.
What? Really? I don't know this story.
There's not much of a story. I was actually at a Starbucks, and yeah, and he was on the street and pulled out a cigarette, and I'm like, let me get that for you. And then I lit a cigarette, and that's the end of the story, Kevin.
You didn't say anything after that? It was just light a cigarette and then...
No, I never do. No, right. I never ever... No, and if there's some reference, I make it as mundane as possible. So for example, I had a very long conversation with Bill Pullman about his days as a student at SUNY Delhi. Now, I knew that nobody in his adult life had ever talked to him about going to SUNY Delhi. And so that is why I pursued that line of conversation. Anyway, in The Hurt Locker, the guy is a bomb disposal expert in the Middle East. And when he is done with that, he goes home, and man, it's not for him. There's a scene where he's shopping in the grocery store, just pushing the cart and like buying cereal with his family. And it's like, this is not who he is. Well, he needs to go back out in the field. He is the bomb disposal guy. And if that gets taken away from him, who is he? He didn't know, and he didn't even want to find out. That happens constantly to everybody. It happens in serious ways like that. It happens in frivolous ways. And I'm going to bring up sports again. You find out what type of fan you are when your team is shit.
Yes.
When your team is bad, when it's disappointing and there's no hope at all.
Yeah.
I like the Red Sox. I went to school in Boston. I know a lot of people who like the Red Sox, and there are lots of different types of fans. There are the fans who are there when the Sox are winning, and there are the fans who are there when, they're sub 500. They're not the same types of people. Other kind of almost every sports team I like at this time is an underperformer. And do you watch the games knowing they're going to get blown out? Well, I still do. And I realized, okay, I really do like this team and the organization. And I'm even into the process of failure and hopefully pulling out of that failure. I'm here for that, and I'm around for it. That's the type of fan I am. I'm not saying everybody should be like that. It's kind of like the music thing. Like, if you're only happy when the Sox are winning, well, I'm glad that's part of your life. All of these questions come down to who are you? What do you value? How do you live? And how does all of that fit in or not with whatever broader world is part of your life? I've talked about this so many times. Think about this. I have deliberately shrunk my world. I've talked about why on this podcast, during streams. That's a conscious thing. I've crafted that, and man, I'm trying to make it even smaller. I had to run an errand this morning. I had to go to the bank. I hated that. I didn't want to do that. Thankfully, I didn't see anybody I knew. And the guy at the bank is awesome. And I do like when I go in and he's there. But still, this is a response to what I value, how I want to live, and how I do or do not want to interface with the world. 10 years ago, it was completely different. I can't name the progression of places I lived. I would leave out countries that I lived in if I had to tell you, if you had a gun to my head. I had a totally different setup 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. All of these changes are because I'm constantly reevaluating who I am, what I'm into, what I want, and what I want to do for and with the world. This isn't new. These are old concepts. It's a question of, I say nonconformity, and I don't mean this in the I'm going to dye my hair because I hate my dad nonconformists. I mean this in the literal religious sense of nonconformity to the world. That is a religious term and phrase. Okay. So for example, the Amish are nonconformists in that they have no interest in conforming to the world. Yeah, it makes sense in that point. They're separate from the world. And that's very, very important to them to remain separate. And every couple of years, they evaluate the degree to which they will conform with the world. They talk it over and say, what's acceptable now that wasn't before? And they incrementally figure it out. They go through this analysis on a schedule and have for hundreds of years. Methodists have different views among them in conformity and nonconformity, and how seriously you take it and apply it. A lot of groups of people do this. Entire countries do this. Fly through a country where, for example, a majority Muslim country where alcohol is not allowed. Well, they are deliberately deciding that we do not want to conform with the world in this one way. You think about this all the time, or rather, it's presented to you all the time. You very rarely think of it in these terms. But all of the stuff boils down to, who am I? What do I value? How do I want to live? And how does it fit with everybody else?
Well, when it comes to, New Year's resolutions, it seems like this is a pretty good time to reevaluate all of that stuff. I mean, isn't that the point in many ways of a New Year resolution? New Year resolution is to say, how have I been in the past? What would I like to be in the future? And what steps or changes do I have to make in order to, achieve that goal? So it seems like this is the perfect time to even be having this conversation. I mean, maybe that was kind of like a subconscious move on our parts as we head into the new year. But which is not to say that you shouldn't be doing this all year. Like, obviously you should. That's really the overarching point, is that you should be doing this every day, because this stuff is such a slow burn and such an incremental process that it friggin' is the process of your entire life, really, from the beginning to end. But at the same time, it's always important to have kind of touch points or inflection points, I guess you would say, in which more effort is put into different things, which is what, like, say, Christmas is. That's a point in which more effort is put into your family, right? Like, everybody gets together and you give each other gifts, and that's the whole point of that, right? Is forcefully having a moment in which you are trying to appreciate your either immediate, extended, or all family. Well, but now's the time to do what we're talking about, which is to really take a step back and figure out those questions, or at least, put a little bit more emphasis into analyzing them as far as who you are, where you're going, where you are. Are you even working towards thinking about those things? Because that's the point I was trying to make earlier, in which it seems like a lot of people don't even try to think about those things. And, hopefully this podcast will at least get people to consider or evaluate whether or not they're really actually thinking about things. Like, are you cool with just the cursory like puddle depth of the feeling about things, or do you have any interest in digging a little deeper, even on what might be considered a mundane reaction? Like, why don't I like this TV show? Or why do I love this?
Yeah.
Like these things seem very unimportant. But the point is that you are flexing your mental capacity to analyze, to think, to work through things in a way that I think is very advantageous, over the course of your life, and getting you to do that with a lot more important decisions that you have to make. I mean, it is like an exercise, whether, so if you're exercising regularly, by the time it comes to having to run away from a tiger, you're in a much better shape to succeed than the person, who wasn't working out and exercising their body beforehand. Is that a weird analogy to make?
Yeah, that's good. Everything that you just said, I liked. I mean, I just listened and thought, yeah, this is really the point of it. This is how everything works here. And as you were talking, I thought of the three stages of it, right? And the balance that has to happen. Stage one is looking in the mirror at yourself. Okay. If that's all you do and you do too much of it, this is literally the story of Narcissus and where the, the term comes from. It's bad when all you do is look in the mirror, right? But you've got to do it sometimes. And the second stage is finding other people.
Well, the reason,
who will hold the mirror up for you.
Real quick, the reason it's bad is because you stare into the reflective pool until you become so enamored by your reflection that you fall in and you drown and you die. Right? That's the story. You die.
Yeah, I mean, you just spend forever looking at yourself as well. It's like you're in love with your own reflection. It's like that's the thing. Like the people who do that, narcissists don't focus on themselves and then begin to loathe themselves increasingly. They love and value themselves. They think they're right. They think they're the best at things. Right? That's the path. You don't look critically at yourself perpetually and just hate you. That very, very rarely happens. But if you do too much of that, you get in that cycle and it's going to go quite poorly. So ideally, you have somebody who, this is the stage two, who can hold a mirror up to you. That's what we were talking about, why we talked about music. Kevin held the mirror up to me about list songs. I held the mirror up to him before we started the podcast about Neil Shusterman's writing. We do this for each other all the time, and it's incredibly useful. And it's a back and forth. It's not like one of us is constantly just, analyzing the other unsolicited. So there's a balance there that's very important. And the third stage of this is that blend of letting the world hold a mirror up to you and also you holding a mirror up to the world. And that balance is huge. In the chat, Bad Spoon was talking about this in the chat, that, the people who constantly just rip on stuff that other people like, or, politics is obviously the big one. Very, very few people spend their time really touting anything important. 99% of it is taking a dump on the people they think are wrong. So there's an imbalance there with, those people are just desperately trying to hold a mirror up to the world, and that's all they're doing. That balance is off. It's got to go both ways. So in that stage one where you're looking at the mirror, good. You need to start with that and then find the balance of how much you do it, how seriously you take yourself, so you don't hit that narcissistic point. And then the second step, finding other people who you can hold the mirror to and can hold the mirror up to you, and it's a healthy balance. And then the big one, and it's a thing that I think that we've done a very good job with over the years, is getting to a point where we can let the world hold a mirror up to us, and we also occasionally hold a mirror up to the world. I think we found the balance quite nicely with all three of those stages. We're not we're not unhappy people, and we're also not delusionally happy. We have a nice, realistic blend of good and bad and positive and negative and hopeful and doomer. I think that's important. But we have it in those three ways: with ourselves, with a couple other people, and generally, with the world beyond that. If you aren't in this cycle already, you have to start right now. You absolutely have to do this, or you're going to suffer. I can guarantee that you will suffer a great deal more if you don't do this. If you're already in the process, well, revisit the balance. Make sure you are balanced. Try to move up to the next stage if you haven't already. This, I think, is probably the most important thing that people need to do in the coming year. I can't think of anything that is more important. The only thing that would rival it is eating and sleeping well, and that's a completely separate thing. But you got to get a handle on this. You absolutely have to. It's not having a handle on it is at the root of almost every problem that people I know complain about. If you break it down and try to distill it, it gets into one of these questions that has been unanswered for whatever reason.
Yeah, or that balance is off somewhere along the line, right? They're way too far on like one side or the other. You see it over and over and over again, and they don't even recognize it because they're not evaluating things properly. So how could they? You're just, lost in the woods and you don't even know where you are. I think that's good. We are done for this year. We will see you back in 2024. We will definitely have some exciting stuff to talk about, in the coming weeks to share with you all. And we hope that the chat is, see you next year. That's always the joke at this time. See you guys next year.
See you in a year.
See you. We will be back next week for sure. Until then, if you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown. And thank you to all of our patrons for supporting this Patreon supporter driven podcast. We'll be back next week. All right, guys, we're out of here. We will see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and the recent support has been amazing. Sid Poke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. Thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Farrakhan, Jen Mefasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Peddler, Risebread, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Vidioger. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders: Atrocious Guff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight, Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, Jelksies, and of course, Trevstead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. And a special thanks to Main Gear for powering all of our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.